Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are opening up a stack of sources that at first glance might look a little bit like a dusty syllabus from a college literature class. But once you actually start reading this stuff, really getting into it, you realize we are looking at something completely different. We are looking at a riot.
It is absolutely a riot, a revolution in every sense of the word, really.
We are talking about the Romantic Revolution, and I have to stop us right here at the very beginning because we need to clear the air. When I say Romanticism or the Romantics, I think, 99% of people instantly think of Valentine's Day.
They do.
They think of red roses, candlelit dinners, maybe a cheesy rom-com where the guy runs through the airport to stop the plane.
Which is tragic, really, because that definition of romantic is basically a Hallmark card. The capital R romanticism we are diving into today has almost nothing to do with dating. It's a radical counterculture movement that it exploded in Europe in the late 18th century.
I was reading through the notes on this, and the thing that really struck me is that this wasn't just a change in how people wrote poems. It was a total overhaul of the human operating system. It was a vibe shift so massive that we are, arguably still living in the aftershocks of it today.
That is the perfect way to frame it. Think of it this way. For centuries, the dominant operating system of the Western world was logic. It was structure. It was Descartes' famous line, "I think, therefore I am."
Right. The brain is in charge.
Exactly. The brain is the CEO.
Yeah.
But then, practically overnight, in historical terms, the script flips completely. The new operating system becomes, "I feel, therefore I am."
And that is a dangerous shift. Moving from the head to the heart isn't just about writing prettier songs or something. It changes how you vote, how you work, how you treat nature, and, how you understand your own sanity.
It changes everything, and it didn't happen in a vacuum. We have to set the scene here because the context is, it's everything. We are looking at Europe in the late 1700s. It is a time of absolute terrifying chaos.
Right.
You have political revolutions toppling kings who had been on the throne for centuries. You have the Industrial Revolution just starting to rise up, filling the sky with coal smoke and completely changing the daily rhythm of human life for the first time in all of history.
And so, amidst all this noise and machinery and guillotines, you have this group of poets and artists, William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, William Blake, and their friends across the channel who decide to reject the entire system.
They looked at the modern world being built around them, this world of factories and data and efficiency, and they said, no. We refuse. They drew a line in the sand.
So our mission today is to really unpack this. We want to understand Romanticism, not just as, nature poetry, but as a survival strategy. We want to see how the factories and the political betrayals fueled this fire. And we want to understand why, for these people, taking a walk in the woods wasn't just exercise.
Not at all.
It was a deep dive into the human mind.
It was a way to save their souls, literally.
And we have a massive stack of sources to get through to figure this out. We've got William Wordsworth's preface to Lyrical Ballads, which is, it's basically the manifesto of the movement.
It's their Declaration of Independence.
Yeah. And we have historical analyses of the French and Industrial Revolutions to get the context. We have some heavy literary theory from M.H. Abrams about how these poems actually work mechanically. And we're looking at the godfathers of the movement, like Jean-Jacques Rousseau and the German Sturm und Drang movement.
It is a fascinating collection.
Yeah.
And what I love about this stack is that it connects the dots between things you wouldn't normally put together, like the structure of a poem and, say, the structure of a political revolution.
Okay, so let's jump right into section 1, the old guard versus the new wave. Because to understand why the Romantics were so angry and so radical, you have to understand what they were rebelling against.
That is the golden rule of history, isn't it? You have to look at the parents to understand the rebellious teenagers. In this case, the parent was the Enlightenment, or, in literary terms, the neoclassical period.
Neoclassical, okay.
This was the Age of Reason, stretching roughly from about 1660 up to 1798, right when our story really begins.
The Age of Reason sounds very safe, very organized, calm.
It was incredibly organized. You have to remember, prior to this, Europe had been torn apart by religious wars, just centuries of bloodshed, people killing each other over slightly different interpretations of scripture. So the Enlightenment thinkers, scientists, philosophers, they said, okay, emotions and fanaticism get us killed. Let's not do that anymore.
So what's the alternative?
Reason.
Yeah.
Logic. They said, let's rely on reason, let's rely on logic, categorization, and universal laws that apply to everyone, everywhere.
So they wanted to turn the world into a math problem. If we can just find the right formula, we can solve society.
Essentially, yes. They loved geometry. Look at the architecture of that time. Think of the Palace of Versailles.
Oh, right. The gardens there are famous.
Exactly. The gardens of Versailles are not nature. They are geometry imposed on nature. Every hedge is a perfect square. Every path is a straight line. The trees are tortured into these perfect spheres.
It's like a grid.
It's a grid. It represents the human mind conquering the chaos of nature. It's humanity saying, look, nature, you're messy. We're in charge now. We're going to put you in a box. That is the Enlightenment vibe in a nutshell.
So what did the poetry look like in a world that loves square hedges?
It looked like a square hedge. It was what we call intellectual poetry of the town. It was witty, it was social, and it was incredibly structured. The big dog of this era was Alexander Pope.
Pope. Okay, I have a quote here from him from his essay on man. And just reading it, you could just hear the difference. He writes, "All nature is but art, unknown to thee. All chance, direction, which thou canst not see. All discord, harmony, not understood. All partial evil, universal good."
Hear that rhythm. Da-dum, da-dum, da-da-da-dum, da-da.
It's like a ticking clock.
It's a metronome. It's perfect, heroic couplets. Every two lines rhyme, and they're in a strict iambic pentameter. And look at the content. He is saying that everything is fine, everything is ordered. If you think things are messy, if you see discord, it's just because you aren't smart enough to see the grand universal harmony.
It feels very top-down, like sit down, shut up, and trust the system. The smart people have it all figured out.
It is very top-down.
Yeah.
This was poetry for the coffee houses of London. It was for lords and ladies to discuss society, manners, and politics. It was polished, it was objective, and it was emotionally distant. There was no room for, your messy personal feelings.
So the romantics show up, and they look at this polished, ticking clock poetry, and they just, they hate it.
They hated it. They felt it was artificial. They felt it was a cage for the human spirit. The new wave, the younger generation, looked at Alexander Pope and said, where's the blood? Where's the sweat? Where's the actual feeling of being alive in this? They felt that by focusing so much on the intellect and the city, the Enlightenment had starved the human heart.
It's like the difference between a perfectly composed architectural drawing of a building and a messy charcoal sketch of a storm hitting that building.
That is a great analogy. One is about control, the other is about experience. And speaking of storms, before the Romantics fully exploded in England, there was a rumble in Germany that we really need to talk about. The Sturm und Drang movement.
Sturm und Drang. Storm and stress. That is the best name for a literary movement I have ever heard. It sounds like a heavy metal band.
It was the heavy metal of the 1770s, absolutely.
Yeah.
This was a proto-romantic movement, a kind of test run. And the vibe was exactly what the name suggests. It was all about intense, violent, emotional expression. It was a revolt against all those societal norms and rules we just talked about. It was about subjectivity. The idea that my personal pain, my inner world is more important than your social rules.
And there's one specific book that really launched this whole thing, right? The Sorrows of Young Werther by Goethe.
Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. This book was a cultural nuclear bomb in 1774. It's an epistolary novel, so it's told through letters written by a young artist named Werther. He is sensitive, he loves nature, he hates having a normal job, and he falls desperately in love with a woman named Lotte.
But Lotte is engaged to someone else, of course.
Of course. And the fiancé, Albert, is the perfect symbol of the Enlightenment. He is stable, he's rational, he has a good job, he follows the rules. He's a good guy, but he's boring.
He's a square hedge.
He's a square hedge. And Werther is the romantic. He has all feeling, all passion, and he's tortured by this unrequited love. He can't handle it. A rational person would say, okay, she's engaged, that's a shame, time to move on.
But Werther doesn't do that.
No. Werther says, I feel this, therefore it is the only reality that matters. My pain is the center of the universe. And, spoiler alert, for a 250-year-old book, Werther kills himself in the end.
He does, but it's the way it's written that was so revolutionary, right? It's not just the plot.
Exactly. The book describes his emotions in such raw, unfiltered, almost painful detail that it mesmerized Europe. People had never read anything like it. It was so personal.
I read that this book actually caused a massive real-world trend, a kind of moral panic.
Oh, it did. It was the first instance of Werther fever. Young men all across Europe started dressing like Werther blue coats, yellow vests, boots. They adopted his melancholy attitude. And tragically, there was a documented wave of copycat suicides.
Wow.
Yeah. People were found dead with copies of the book in their pockets. It was so influential that some cities banned the book. It showed just how hungry people were for this kind of emotional expression.
It proves that under all that age of reason logic, people were just desperate to feel something real, even if that feeling was tragic.
Precisely. It showed that the operating system of pure logic was failing. People weren't machines, their hearts were overflowing, and this book gave them permission to let it out.
So you have the Germans screaming and crying with Sturm und Drang. But then you have this other figure who is often called the father of Romanticism, the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
Rousseau is the philosophical anchor for all of this. He was French, writing a bit earlier than Sturm und Drang, but his ideas were the fuel for everything the Romantics would later do. If you want to understand Romanticism, you have to understand Rousseau's core idea, which is simply back to nature.
Now, back to nature is something we see on granola bars today. It sounds nice and gentle, pastoral. But for Rousseau, this was a fighting hostility, wasn't it? It was an attack.
Oh, it was incredibly aggressive. Rousseau wasn't saying go camping or gardening is nice. He was saying that civilization itself is a mistake, that society is a disease.
That is a bold take.
It was a bombshell. He believed that human beings are born good. We are born free. We are born innocent and full of natural sympathy for each other. But then society, with its laws, its schools, its property rights, its obsession with manners, it corrupts us.
He has that famous line, right? Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains.
That's the one. He argued that the chains were forged by society, by the city, by progress. He's basically flipping the Christian idea of original sin on its head.
Right. The church said we are born sinners and need rules and civilization to be made good.
And Rousseau said we are born good, and the rules and civilization are what make us bad. He thought the so-called savage living in nature was morally superior to the Parisian aristocrat.
And because of this focus on the natural, authentic self, he became obsessed with autobiography. He wrote a book called Confessions.
Yes, and this was another game changer. I mean, people had written memoirs before, but they were usually about their public lives, their careers as generals or politicians.
Their resume, basically.
Their resume, yeah.
Yeah.
Rousseau wrote about his feelings. He wrote about his sexual awakenings. He wrote about times he stole things and lied and felt ashamed. He detailed all his personal flaws and insecurities.
He was the original oversharer.
He absolutely was. And it was revolutionary. He was saying, my inner life, my messy, embarrassing, private self is a worthy subject for serious literature. That is the seed of Romanticism, the validation of the subjective experience.
Okay, so we have the setup. The Enlightenment is the strict parent who demands order. Rousseau and the Germans are the rebellious kids screaming that their feelings matter more than the rules. But this wasn't just a battle of books. This was all happening while the actual world was catching fire.
Exactly. Which brings us to Section 2, the twin engines of change, the French Revolution and the Industrial Revolution.
You cannot separate the poetry from the politics here, can you? The Romantics didn't just decide to write about nature because they got bored of the city. They were reacting to trauma.
Deep cultural trauma.
On two fronts.
Let's start with the political one. The French Revolution in 1789. This is a massive deal for the early Romantics in England, like Wordsworth and Coleridge, right? They weren't just watching it on the news. They were emotionally invested. They were obsessed. You have to imagine being a young, idealistic person in the late 1780s. The world is this rigid, hierarchical place run by kings and aristocrats who inherit their power. And then suddenly in France, the people rise up. They storm the Bastille.
And their battle cry is liberty, equality, fraternity.
To these young poets in England, this looked like Rousseau's philosophy coming to life. They thought, this is it. The old world of tyranny is over. We are going to build a new Jerusalem, a paradise of natural freedom on earth.
Wordsworth has that famous line in his long poem, The Prelude. Bliss was it in that dawn to be alive, but to be young was very heaven.
And that captures the euphoria perfectly. They felt like they were standing at the beginning of a new history. They actually traveled to France. Wordsworth had a French lover, had a child with her. They wanted to be part of it.
The party didn't last long.
No. The dream turned into a nightmare very, very quickly. The revolution got paranoid. It started eating its own. The guillotine started falling, not just on the king and queen, but on anyone who looked suspicious. The reign of terror began.
And then, after all the bloodshed, what happens? Napoleon, a general, rises up and crowns himself emperor. The whole thing ends with another dictator.
Right. So imagine the psychological whiplash. You think you're watching the birth of universal freedom, and instead you get a bloodbath followed by a military dictatorship.
Yeah.
How did the poets handle that betrayal?
It must have been devastating.
It broke them. Wordsworth, in particular, went into a deep, multi-year depression. He had a nervous breakdown. But, and this is the crucial pivot for our entire deep dive, they didn't give up on the idea of liberty. They just lost faith in political solutions.
They realize you can't force freedom with a guillotine.
Exactly. So where do they go? If the external world is a disaster, if politics is a lie,
They went inward.
they went inward. They internalized the revolution. They decided that if you can't be free in the streets of Paris, you have to be free in your own mind. They shifted the battlefield from the state to the self, from politics to the imagination.
That is such a key insight. Romanticism is basically a political revolution that retreated into the human skull.
That is a perfect way to put it. They started focusing on the liberty of the mind, on the rights of the natural impulse. If the government won't let you be free, you find freedom by connecting with nature, with your memories, and with your own creativity.
Which brings us to the other monster in the room. The thing that was physically changing the landscape of England while all this was happening. The Industrial Revolution.
This is the second trauma, the environmental and social trauma. Imagine you are living in England in, say, 1750. It's green, it's quiet, it's an agrarian society. Life moves at the speed of the seasons. You work when the sun is up, you sleep when it's down.
Your life is tied to natural rhythms.
Completely. And then the machine starts. The steam engine is perfected. Factories rise up. And suddenly the world changes faster than it ever has before. People flood from the villages into these massive, unplanned, overcrowded cities like Manchester and London.
We have accounts from the time describing the smoke from the coal fires. It was so thick it would black out the sun at noon. The noise was deafening metal on metal 24 hours a day.
And think about time itself. In a factory, you don't work by the sun. You work by the clock. You punch in, you punch out. You perform the same repetitive task for 12, 14 hours a day. You become a cog in the machine. This introduced a new kind of human suffering. Alienation.
Alienation. That's a word Karl Marx would later make famous, but the Romantics felt it first.
They did. They saw it happening. In a village, if you were a shoemaker, you made the whole shoe. You saw it from start to finish. You knew who was going to wear it. You had pride in your craft.
There's a human connection.
A deep one. In a factory, you just pull a lever. You are separated from the product, separated from nature, and separated from your own humanity. You become a hand.
Charles Dickens writes about this decades later in Hard Times. The factory workers are just called hands, not people.
Exactly. So when the Romantics looked at these dark, satanic mills, as the poet William Blake called them, they were horrified. They saw a world that was becoming a machine, a world that was ugly, loud, and heartless, a world that was destroying both the green English countryside and the human soul.
So when Wordsworth writes a poem about wandering lonely as a cloud and seeing a field of daffodils, he isn't just saying, oh, look, pretty flowers. He is saying, I am not a machine. My soul is not a factory.
Yes, it is a profound act of rebellion. Nature became the antidote. Nature wasn't just scenery anymore. It was the opposite of the factory. It was the only place left where the rules of the machine didn't apply. It was spiritual. It was pure. It was a place to remember what it meant to be human.
That completely changes how I read these poems. It's not a hobby. It's a rescue mission.
Yeah.
They're trying to find the human soul out in the woods because it's been evicted from the city.
Precisely. It was a matter of life and death for the spirit.
Okay, so we have the motive. They hate the Enlightenment's cold math. They are traumatized by the failure of the French Revolution, and they are suffocating in the smoke of the Industrial Revolution. Now they need a plan. They need a manifesto. And that brings us to Section 3, Lyrical Ballads and the Preface.
This is the moment the bomb drops in English literature. 1798. William Wordsworth and his friend Samuel Taylor Coleridge anonymously published this little book called Lyrical Ballads.
And to us, looking back, it just looks like a book of poems. But at the time, the critics, they hated it, didn't they?
They were baffled. They thought it was garbage. One critic called the poems absurd. Another said they were like nursery rhymes for adults. Because you have to remember, people were used to Alexander Pope. They expected high-flown language, references to Greek gods, and very serious, elevated subjects.
And what did Wordsworth give them instead?
He gave them The Idiot Boy. He gave them The Mad Mother. He wrote poems about beggars and abandoned women and old men who gather leeches from swamps for a living.
So he was writing about the invisible people, the people society ignored.
He was the common man, and he was doing it in what he called the language really used by men. This was shocking. The critics hated it so much that when a second edition was planned for 1802, the publisher asked Wordsworth to write an introduction, a preface, to explain what on earth he was trying to do.
And that preface becomes the manifesto. It's him basically telling the critics, hey, I did this on purpose, here's why you're wrong. Let's dig into that preface. First, he redefines who a poet is.
He does. Before this, a poet was a scholar, an elite, educated man of the city. Wordsworth writes that a poet is simply a man speaking to men.
A man speaking to men. It sounds so simple, but it's incredibly democratic.
It strips away the pedestal. He is saying, I am not better than you. I am not speaking down to you from an ivory tower. I just have a livelier sensibility. I feel things a little more deeply, maybe. I have a greater power of expression. But I am speaking to you as an equal about the things that connect us all.
And because he is speaking to us as equals, he refuses to use what he called poetic diction.
Yeah.
He refuses to use the fake fancy words that were popular at the time.
Right. No more calling a fish a finny tribe. No more calling the wind Zephyr.
Yeah.
He wanted to use the language of the common people. Specifically, he said, rural people. He believed that people who lived close to nature and the basic realities of life spoke a language that was more authentic, more passionate.
He thought the fancy city language was just a mask, a way to sound smart without actually feeling anything.
Exactly. He called it a gaudy and inane phraseology. He said it was a way to hide a lack of real feeling. He wanted to strip all that away and get to the core of human emotion.
And that leads to the most famous definition in the entire book. Maybe the most famous definition of poetry ever written. The spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings.
It is the slogan of the revolution. The spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Think about the physics of that image. Overflow. It's a liquid. It's uncontrollable. It suggests that the feeling is so big, the container of the mind can't hold it anymore. It has to spill out.
It's the opposite of the square hedge. It's messy.
It is the absolute opposite. It's a flood.
But wait, I want to play devil's advocate here for a second. If poetry is just a spontaneous overflow, why isn't it just screaming? You know, if I stub my toe and scream a curse word, is that a romantic poem?
Laughs. No. And that is the brilliant nuance that people often miss. They stop reading after the first half of the sentence. He continues to say that this emotion is recollected in tranquility.
Recollected in tranquility. This is the secret sauce. Walk us through that process. What does that mean?
Okay, so it's a two-stage process. Stage one is the experience. You are standing on a cliff. The wind is howling. You feel the sublime. You are overwhelmed with awe and terror. That is the spontaneous overflow. But you cannot write a good poem in that moment. You are too busy feeling it.
Right. You're just in the moment experiencing it.
So you go home. You let time pass, an hour, a day, a year. You sit in your chair. You find tranquility. And then stage two, you use your memory and your imagination to call that feeling back. But because you are calm now, you can observe it. You can shape it. You can find the meaning in it. You can choose the right words to communicate it to someone else.
This is like a distillery. You take the raw, fermented mash of the initial emotion, and you distill it through the calm process of thought into the fine, pure spirit of poetry.
That is a beautiful metaphor, yes. It creates a bridge between the heart and the head. It's not just feeling, it's understanding the feeling. Wordsworth says the goal is to trace the fluxes and refluxes of the mind. He wants to understand how our psychology works when it interacts with the world. He's an early psychologist, in a way.
So we have the theory, we have the distillery, but what does the final product actually look like? How do they build these poems? This brings us to section 4, the mechanics of the deep dive.
This is where we have to get a little technical for a minute, but it's fascinating. There is a brilliant critic from the 20th century named M.H. Abrams who analyzed these poems, the big ones, like Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey or Coleridge's Frost at Midnight, and he realized they all follow a specific blueprint. He called it the greater romantic lyric.
And it has a clear 3-part structure we can track, an out-and-out pattern.
Right, out and out. It's like a mental journey that happens while the poet is physically still.
Let's apply this. Let's look at Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey. I mean, this is the heavyweight champion of romantic poems. It starts with the out.
It does. The full title is Lines Composed a Few Miles Above Tintern Abbey on Revisiting the Banks of the Wye During a Tour, July 13th, 1798. He's telling you exactly where he is. The poem opens with him standing on a hill above the Wye Valley. He hasn't been there in 5 years. And he describes exactly what he sees. He says, 5 years have passed, 5 summers with the length of 5 long winters. And again, I hear these waters.
He's setting the scene.
He's grounding us in physical reality. He describes the cliffs, the sycamore tree, the hedgerows, little lines of sportive wood run wild. The camera's pointing outward.
Okay, so we are on the hill, we see the hedge, we hear the river. Then what happens?
Then comes the pivot, the inn. The landscape triggers a memory. He starts thinking about how he has used the memory of this place over the last 5 years. He says that when he was stuck in the din of towns and cities, living in lonely rooms, he would close his eyes and remember this river. And he would give him sensations sweet. It was like a mental medicine.
So nature becomes a memory bank you can draw from when you're stuck in the ugly city.
Exactly. The camera has turned inward. He is now exploring his own mind. He starts meditating on how he has changed. He realizes he isn't the same kid he was when he first visited 5 years ago. This is the two consciousnesses idea we find in the sources.
Two consciousnesses.
Yes. He sees the landscape as he is now, a thoughtful, somewhat weary adult, but he also remembers how he saw it then, as a wild, energetic teenager. He says back then he bounded over the mountains like a roe, like a deer. He didn't think, he just ran. He loved nature for the adrenaline rush, the pure physical joy.
But now he has lost that, and that sounds kind of sad.
It is sad. There's that deep romantic melancholy. He admits that time has passed. But this is the deep dive, the resolution. He argues that he has gained something better in exchange. He has gained a philosophic mind. He says he has learned to look on nature, not as in the hour of thoughtless youth, but hearing often the still, sad music of humanity.
The still, sad music of humanity. That is one of my favorite lines in all of poetry. It means he sees the suffering and complexity in the world now, but that awareness makes the beauty deeper, not less.
Precisely. And he feels a presence, a sense sublime, of something far more deeply interfused. He has this mystical experience where he realizes that there is a spiritual force that connects everything, a force that rolls through all things, the ocean, the air, the sky, and the mind of man. This is the one life theory. Everything is connected. The mind and the tree are part of the same divine system.
So he has gone deep in. He has had this massive philosophical revelation right there on the hillside. How does he get back out?
He turns to his sister Dorothy. She is standing right next to him the whole time, but he hasn't mentioned her until the last section of the poem. And this is a crucial move in the greater romantic lyric. There's almost always a silent listener.
Why? Why not just talk to himself?
Because if he talks to himself, it's a soliloquy. It's Hamlet on the stage. It can feel abstract, internal. If he talks to a silent listener, in Coleridge's poems, it's his baby son or his wife. It becomes a conversation. It becomes intimate. It anchors the poem's grand philosophical ideas in real human love and connection.
So he looks at Dorothy.
And he sees his former self in her wild eyes. She is still young, still full of that thoughtless joy. And he says a prayer for her. He blesses her. He says he hopes that nature will be as important to her as it has been to him. He ends by saying, nature never did betray the heart that loved her. He returns to the scene, the out, but the scene is transformed. It's not just a river and some trees anymore. It's a symbol of continuity, of love, of the connection between past and present, between his soul and his sister's.
So the out and out structure isn't a circle. It's a spiral. You come back to the same place, but you are on a higher level of understanding.
Perfectly said. You have integrated the landscape into your soul. You've achieved a resolution.
That is the mechanism. And once you see that structure, you see it everywhere in romantic poetry. You mentioned Coleridge does it in Frost at midnight.
He does. It's almost a perfect template. He's sitting in a quiet cottage at midnight. That's the out. The Frost is performing its secret ministry outside. Everything is silent. In. He looks at his sleeping baby in the cradle and starts thinking about his own unhappy childhood, being raised in the city, an orphan at a strict school. Out. He blesses the baby and says, you are going to grow up in nature, wandering like a breeze. You will be happier than me because God will speak to you through the landscape, not through books. It's the same beautiful therapy session.
It really is therapy. It's using the external environment to map and resolve your internal conflicts.
Which is why it feels so modern. It's basically mindfulness 200 years ahead of its time.
Okay, we are in the home stretch here. We have the history, the manifesto, the structure. Now let's zoom out to the big picture themes in section 5. We have touched on nature, but we need to talk specifically about the sublime. Because the Romantics didn't just like pretty, calm flowers. They like scary mountains.
This is a huge distinction that philosophers of the time, like Edmund Burke and Immanuel Kant, wrote about. The Romantics separated the beautiful from the sublime.
What's the difference?
The beautiful is small, smooth, orderly, and safe. A flower is beautiful. A calm stream is beautiful. It makes you feel relaxed and pleased. The sublime is vast, rugged, powerful, and terrifying.
Like what?
A thunderstorm. An erupting volcano, looking at the endless ocean from a cliff, standing at the foot of the Alps. Anything that is so huge and powerful, it threatens to overwhelm you.
So why would anyone want to experience that? It sounds stressful.
because it creates a specific and powerful psychological reaction. Kant argued that when you look at something infinite, like a massive mountain range, your senses are overwhelmed. You can't take it all in. You feel tiny. You feel a sense of physical terror, like this thing could crush you.
Okay, that sounds bad.
But then your mind kicks in. Your faculty of reason realizes, wait, I can comprehend this idea of infinity. My mind is bigger than this mountain. I can stand here and look at this storm and not be destroyed by it. And that realization makes you feel incredibly powerful. The physical danger makes you realize your spiritual or intellectual greatness.
So the sublime is a two-step process of feeling small, then feeling big. It's a way of expanding your soul by confronting something much bigger than yourself.
Exactly. It's the feeling you get when you look up at the stars on a clear night. You feel insignificant, but you also feel connected to infinity. The Romantics were adrenaline junkies for that feeling. It was a spiritual high.
Another theme we keep bumping into is imagination. And I want to be careful here because today, imagination often means making stuff up. You know, like a kid's imaginary friend. Oh, it's just your imagination.
Right. For the Romantics, imagination was not make-believe. It was a sensory organ. It was a tool for perceiving the deepest truth of reality.
William Blake is the king of this, right?
Blake is the absolute king of this. He believed that our physical eyes, the vegetable eyes as he contemptuously called them, only see the dead surface of things. They see a grain of sand. But the imagination, which he saw as a divine faculty, sees the spiritual reality inside that grain of sand.
To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower.
Exactly. He believed that the world we see with our ordinary eyes is dead matter. The imagination is what brings it to life. It reveals the eternal divine patterns behind the temporary objects. So for Blake, and for Coleridge too, imagination was almost a religious faculty. It's how we participate in God's creative process.
And finally, we have to talk about the mood. Melancholy. Why are these guys always so sad?
It's true. They are a moody bunch. But again, it's not just depression in the clinical sense. It's what we might call creative melancholy, especially for the poet John Keats.
Keats died very young, right? He was only 25.
He did. He had tuberculosis. He knew he was dying for the last few years of his life. So his poetry is obsessed with the idea that beauty is fleeting and temporary. In his ode on a melancholy, he says that melancholy dwells with beauty. You cannot have one without the other.
Because if a rose lasted forever, it would be plastic. It wouldn't really be beautiful.
Exactly. The fact that it will die is what makes its beauty so precious and intense. So the Romantics tried to savor that sadness. Keats wrote he was half in love with easeful death. They wanted to feel the passing of time because it made the present moment more intense. They didn't want to be numb. They wanted to feel the sharp edge of existence, both the joy and the pain.
Which brings us to the final conflict, science versus poetry. We talked about the Enlightenment loving science. Did the Romantics just hate science?
Not exactly. But they hated what they called the meddling intellect, the tendency of science to analyze everything to death. Wordsworth famously wrote, "We murder to dissect."
We murder to dissect. That is such a brutal, powerful line.
It means that if you see a beautiful bird and you want to understand how it flies, and so you shoot it and cut it open to look at the muscles and bones, you have learned something. Sure, you've gained knowledge. But you have killed the bird. You have lost the song. You have lost the life.
You have lost the whole by focusing on the parts.
Right. They felt that science breaks things down into dead parts, atoms, laws, classifications, whereas poetry tries to see the living whole, the interconnected spirit of things. Wordsworth said poetry is the breath and finer spirit of all knowledge. He thought science gave us the skeleton, but poetry gave us the living, breathing body.
That is a profound place to land. It's not anti-intellectual. It's pro-life, pro-wholeness.
It is. It's about keeping the magic and the mystery in the world, not explaining it all away.
So we have covered a massive amount of ground here. We've gone from the geometric gardens of Versailles to the storm-tossed Alps. We've seen how the guillotine and the steam engine forced people to retreat into their own minds. We've seen how Wordsworth and Coleridge turned a walk in the woods into a spiritual discipline.
It really was a total revolution, a complete paradigm shift in how we see ourselves and the world.
And as we wrap up, I want to bring this back to the listener. Why does this matter now in the 21st century?
It matters more than ever, I think, because we are living in a hyper-enlightenment world.
What do you mean by that?
Look around us. We are obsessed with data. We are obsessed with efficiency and optimization. We track our sleep, we track our steps, we let algorithms decide what movies we watch and who we should date. We trust the spreadsheet more than we trust our own gut feelings.
We are trying to turn our lives back into the perfect order of the Enlightenment. We want to be a perfect machine.
We are trying to be machines, and we're burning out. But the central romantic lesson is that we are not machines. We are organisms. We are messy and emotional and contradictory.
Wordsworth wrote that famous line, "The child is father of the man." What he meant was that our intuitive, innocent feeling childhood self is actually wiser and more foundational than our adult, rational self.
Right. The child creates the adult. And if we crush that child, if we crush that spontaneous overflow of feeling under a mountain of data and efficiency and expectations, we become alienated. We become the hands in the factory all over again.
So, the provocative thought for you to take away today is this. In a world that demands you be efficient, that demands you quantify everything, maybe the most radical, rebellious, romantic thing you can do is be inefficient.
Go waste time. Go for a walk without a destination. Stare at a tree for 10 minutes.
Go feel something sublime that scares you a little bit. Trust your intuition over the algorithm, just once.
Stop dissecting the flower and just smell it.
Because if the romantics were right, that is not an escape from reality. That is the only way to actually be alive. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
See you out in the woods.